I'm Tucker Marion. I'm an associate professor in the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Group at Northeastern University, and my research is centered around the innovation process and how that impacts not only large companies but also new ventures. What motivated the research is actually, somewhat personal. I was involved in new product development and manufacturing and operations in large companies. I worked in the auto industry, and I was frustrated by the amount of bureaucracy and procedures to get things done. So I looked to change a career, and I became involved in the startup world. And what was interesting to me was the differences between zero-stage ventures and wearing many hats, and the difficulty of getting things done, but also the rewards of getting things done and making it your own. And I personally went through, a failure of a company, and it was very affected personally, actually. And what I was interested in is the mechanisms of what can be successful, what can be done successfully to go from an idea to commercialization, and then what are the pitfalls within the process. Because I had come from an industry that was so regimented and disciplined in terms of procedure and process, what would be the impact, and what is the influence of process on new ventures? Is it impactful? Is it not impactful? Is it done completely differently? So I started to collect information on that even before entering into a PhD program. And my PhD dissertation background and what I wanted to study was the new product development process in early stage ventures. Do new ventures use a process? Is it similar with different industries? Is there anything associated with what they do in terms of daily tasks and managing the design and engineering and fundraising and setting up supply chains and success or failure? And that's what I worked on, and then continued to work with companies embedded in the process, if you will, and collecting data and research on seeing what happens during that stage from idea to getting something out, and hopefully getting something out and generating revenue in terms of the product development process or innovation process. So the approach to research was somewhat open-ended and exploratory. So what I wanted to do, and this was deep in embedded ethnographic research, to really be embedded participant in what was going on, and try to collect as many things and observe as many things as you could, because there's so much going on when you're trying to develop a technology, test it, prototype it, get it to market. There are a lot of things that can affect it. So looking at emails, meetings, all of those interactions between vendors and suppliers and engineers to see what's going on. Of course, the overarching theme of the work I was doing was the umbrella was the new product development process and what actually happens. But it wasn't specifically focused on one particular element. And I think that now, going back and looking at things and trying to tease that out, what that means for theory, and what things you can tease out to actually, based on those observations, that's what was resulting of the paper that we got published in the Journal of Business Venturing. We looked at it through one particular lens. So the research lens of the research was to look at, if you think of early stage, zero stage ventures, often they can be founded or started by people that may not have an expertise in a particular area. And of course, to get resources, you may have to enter into relationships with outside vendors, be it an engineer, a software developer, a manufacturer, a designer, a graphical user interface designer, for example. And so our lens to look at it was, how do these relationships impact impact the process of going from that idea to getting something to market? And is do those relationships change over time? And are there differences in stages? You know, exploration and research and that first phase of an idea and exploration, developing concepts is very fun. But then if you're going to continue, you have to make it real. And if you have an engineered product, you need to test it. It needs to work. You need to find some place to make it. And of course, there's the whole business side. Who's going to buy it? Does the business model make sense? And all those sorts of things. The lens that we looked at was the detailed process of getting something to market and all the engineering that went along with it. And the interesting thing that came out of the research was that there are differences in the relationships that can develop over time. And one of the interesting insights for us in the research was, as you start making things real, and it almost takes it from classic project management research, that as you get further along, there are different sources of conflict and stress within the environment. And new ventures are an interesting area because either you are successful or you fail, and you waste money or go through money, and it's not good for any party. So the cauldron of stress I think, can be even further amplified in that environment. And when you have an entrepreneur who's passionate about their idea, what we found in the research is that if, for example, let's say you contracted with an outside partner, maybe it's a manufacturer or during some phase of the development, and you're relying on that person to get something to market. You may have a contract. And what we found is sometimes these things start to change over time. A pure contractual relationship may turn into an alliance. Maybe the manufacturer gets more comfortable or gets excited about the possibility of this product getting to market, and maybe they want to have some skin in the game, so to speak. And one of the things that was interesting to us is as we observed as the process went along and things became more real, and the stress to commercialize began to change relationships, whereas an alliance may start to become enmeshed, and the entrepreneur and the let's say service provider, for example, are so closely intertwined, and they want to get this thing done, that they begin to make decisions that may not be beneficial to either party. It's almost blinders in a way. You're so focused on getting something out that they're not taking a step back and looking at the big picture and looking at mistakes or stepping away and stopping the project. So that was an interesting insight. We also found that there are some entrepreneurs that have somewhat, and we mentioned in the paper, a little bit of skepticism along the process, and they may not become enmeshed with a lot of partners, even if they have a strong alliance. There is still a reservation. And in the paper we talk about, there's a quote from Ronald Reagan, "Trust but verify," that they still have something in the back of their mind that doesn't cause them to go completely involved and enmeshed in this relationship to get something to market. And there are those that, even if they became enmeshed, recognized it and pulled back and ultimately made the right decision, which I think is interesting. And there are, in terms of theory, there are socioemotional bonds and psychological contracts and trust and all these sorts of things that I think this research was exploratory, that I think could be dived into or explored more deeply in the future, and we hope to do that. One of the things that might be interesting, and let's say for example, technical projects or electronics or those sorts of things, and you may have things that are very, very difficult to solve. You may look at warning signs as the continued outflow of money to technical resources and a lack of improvement in performance. I mean, that's a pretty classic standard metric, but what we've seen is a continued there can be issues of wanting to have something work so badly that you continue to put money into the problem, And that warning sign, it's hard to say what might pop up or what kind of mechanism you do in the process. I don't know if it's board level or if it's management level, but to really have put sanity checks in place. And I think that in new ventures, because there's such a passion, that you can sometimes look beyond that kind of taking a step back and looking in a sane view of the entire project before you are spending another $500,000 on something to try to get a manufacturing problem resolved. It's funny with entrepreneurship, there's always kind of a duality. You need to have the freedom to explore and innovate, but then you need to have some sort of discipline to manage milestones and manage expectations. And it's that balance that I think that we've seen that good entrepreneurs can do that intrinsically. You can go out and let the team explore, but then you can take a step back and evaluate things and see where they are. So that I think that being able to have teams and VCs and board members understand the importance of that, I think that's important to do. And I think that it's important at all age levels, and particularly we're trying to train very young entrepreneurs to have that. And one of the things I think is interesting in the paper, and we don't necessarily dive into it, and in future research we'd like to, but we did notice that there can be a mentor-mentee relationship. If you have a young entrepreneur and you have a relationship or an alliance or partnership with a very experienced group or individual, that there can be a formation of that mentor-mentee relationship, and that may be a potential cause of enmeshment, because I'm dealing with this expert and I'm going to believe what they say because they have a lot of experience in this, but maybe they're not doing the right thing, and take a step back and evaluate that. So I think that's could be an interesting area to explore.